Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Liberty Show with Kevin Fortune. I'm Kevin Fortune, KK, the King of Liberty, where we try to put liberty into action. But this podcast is to provide a national platform where people like you, the everyday citizen, can raise your voice to help put liberty into action. Just a quick few housekeeping things. We just want to welcome everyone. We want to invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Liberty Show with Kevin Fortune. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and like us there. We're also available on Anchor, on Spotify, Apple, iTunes, as well as other podcast platforms. Now, if you would like to be one of our patrons, you can go to patreon.com/The Liberty Show. It's only $5 a month. We really do need your support. We're actually trying to get some video equipment so you can actually see what we look like, and so that we can travel around and take these podcasts out in the community and help put it more into action. Also, we invite you, follow us on Facebook as well as Instagram. Make sure you subscribe there. Well, we're excited tonight, as well as a little sober. We're going to talk about something that is really important. It's a matter of life and death, literally a matter of life and death. This coronavirus and how it is affecting our nation right now, it's a matter of life and death physically, but it's also a matter of life and death to our nation. Some of our liberties, our financial markets, businesses, jobs, a lot of them are dying, maybe never to return again. So we're going to talk about that tonight, the coronavirus and the pandemic and how the government is handling it. But we want to hear from you. What do you think about this? Well, first of all, to get started, one of the principles of liberty is limited and less government. But because of this pandemic, we're seeing the government get bigger and bigger, more aggressive, infringing upon our liberties, religious freedoms, individual rights and freedoms, just totally erasing some areas of free market economies. And we want to talk about some of those things and hear what you have to say. So, of course, we're going to get started with my main man, my research expert, the Mr. Long Island Iced Tea himself, Mr. Tim Smith out of Atlanta, Georgia. He's going to give us our background and open up. Go ahead, Tim. You're on the Liberty Show.
Huge shout out to our host, Kevin. Before we go any further, though, I'd like to take a moment of silence for everyone that we've lost due to COVID-19. Worldwide, there are over 1.7 million confirmed cases of COVID-19. We've lost over 20,000 people to this disease, but thankfully, well over 390,000 people have recovered. It wouldn't be right for us not to acknowledge all of the brave individuals on the front lines, the doctors, the nurses, the janitorial staffs at the hospitals. And we have to acknowledge even the truck drivers who provide such a vital services, I should say, risking their lives to provide goods for us during this trying time. And not only that, right? We have folks at home, and this just shows how great the American people, if you will, are. And it's not just here in the States, it's everywhere. Someone today on Facebook offered to make me a mask while they're in their living room sewing masks for people. So a great shout out to everyone who is providing services, providing products during this time. So the Liberty Show would like to say a very big thank you to everyone.
Tim.
Yes, sir.
So what do you think about the government's handling of this situation? Let's get your personal view before we move on.
That's an interesting topic, right? How the government is handling it. I think we can all agree objectively that the government has sucked in handling this pandemic. This isn't, a left-right type situation. This is the thing where we are being taxed. We are being extorted, if you will, to provide paychecks, to provide income, to provide revenues to the government. And in return for them shaking us down, we're supposed to get certain services. One of those certain services is at least a watchman who tells the people, look out, there's a situation arising And we should take care to protect ourselves against that. And if we look, our government, and I'm not even going to go and blame Trump, because honestly, I don't think this is a Trump administration. I think if we go throughout, Bush administration, Obama administration, perhaps Obama and Bush would have handled this pandemic better. But at the end of the day, the government has sucked. And again, this isn't a left or right type issue. This is, what the hell are we being extorted for, and we're not getting a return on our extortion. This is like the mafia shaking down a store owner and saying, listen, I'm going to protect you from all of the other thieves that would jack you. And yet the store owner, the shop owner still gets jacked. He still gets his money taken from another gang. So when I look at what the government has done, I'm deeply displeased. And sadly, I would have thought this would have been a situation where the public would have said, well, why are we so dependent upon the government? Why don't we look to ourselves? Why don't we look to the markets to provide a quote unquote safety net for us? And instead, at least what I'm hearing is that more people are seeking relief from the government. And when I say relief, I'm not talking about stimulus money. What I'm saying is that more people seem to be seeking the government to grow bigger, to grow stronger, instead of taking a look and saying, hey, well, wait a minute. We've had this big government and it's not working out for us. We're now sheltering in place. If the government functioned as the government says it does function, the government would have caught on to this and said, hey, this is a situation that we need to keep an eye on. And not only that, they wouldn't have downplayed this. And again, this, we could chalk that up to Trump. But again, objectively, I don't think Bush nor Obama could have done a much better job. I think this is a situation where we see that government is not as efficient. And those in the liberty movement, we know that government is far from being efficient, but government is nowhere near as efficient as it claims to be. Wow. And that's my take on this, is that, people should be out in the streets. And I don't mean, out in the streets physically, walking about, but I mean, the people should be riled up. The people should be pissed off that, listen, this is a failure of government. What the hell are we paying taxes for if this is what we get in return?
Well, Tim, I totally agree with you. People should be outraged, and I am outraged. I totally agree with you. This is not the first time the government has failed. So when are we going to wake up? Thank you for your input. Stay on there. We're quickly going to go all the way down to the Sunshine State, but and hear from our Republican friend, David in Florida. What do you think from the Republican line?
Hey, Kevin.
Hey.
Gang. This government is there to help us, but they don't solve much. We're still going to get a tax bill after this is all said and done, and it's one none of us can afford alone or all together. It's insanity. The Tea Party tried to address our issues 12 years ago, and what has it got us? Nothing. Our politicians didn't listen then. Debt has to be paid back. Nothing's for free. And you and I and our children are going to have to pay this. And when they finally do, I guess we'll be a third world country.
I think we're already almost a third world country nowadays.
It feels that way.
Well, thanks for your comments. One quick question for you. Being a Republican, and this is a Republican administration, what do you think of Trump's job? And not just him, but the whole administration. I'm very disturbed. Not just because they're still playing party politics and partisanship with this when people's lives are at stake. We started this off talking about it's a matter of life and death, and we don't have time for these games. Will you comment on that?
Well, there's so many games being played that the news media just flat out lies as far as what side they take, and nobody wants to really address the issues and get their hands dirty. This is not a stimulus package by any sense of the means. It's not intended to be. It's just a rescue package. We get through the quarantine period. And then the work is really going to have to get done. So,
well, I agree with you. There's a lot of work.
Americans and bridge the gap.
Wow.
That's what we need to do.
Well, thank you, Dave. It's always good to hear from you. It's always good to hear from different perspectives, and that you're not just sticking with your party, you're sticking with the true principles of liberty. Well, we've got some special guests on our show tonight. We've had two areas in our country that were really heavily affected by this pandemic. It started, one of the most heavily affected was up in Seattle, Washington. And I've got a good friend, a famous Lady of Liberty, Michelle Darnell. She's a lawyer. She actually just started a libertarian type foundation for candidates, and she's run for office and actually got in a really well-noted runoff. She is a libertarian activist. She's one of the people I like because she puts her liberty into action. Welcome to the Liberty Show, Michelle. Let's hear from you.
Hello, Kevin. Can you hear me okay?
Wonderful.
Okay, well, I got to make one quick correction there. I am not an attorney. My husband, Jeff Jarrett, is an attorney. I'm a paralegal, and we have a little home office. We work together. I actually got involved in politics about 10 years ago as a consequence of the recession and the banking crisis, which now, it's deja vu all over again. So I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But I'd like to start out first, Kevin, thanking you very much for donating to my campaign in 2017. I ran as a libertarian in the 48th district here in Washington. Beautiful Bellevue, Redmond, Kirkland is my district, and I was able to get 31% running as a libertarian.
Wow.
And the best part about it was the connections I made and a lot of the lessons I learned along the way that are sort of helping me now in this current situation. So that's a little bit about who I am. I also happen to be a mom, a grandma, got 3 grandkids, and of course a wife. Jeff Jarrett is my husband. He's a libertarian and an attorney. He's run 3 times himself. So we're kind of movers and shakers here in Washington, kind of, working together. I started up the Ignite Foundation I think I started it up in October as a consequence of running for office 3 times. I ran in 2014 as a Republican, and then I switched and ran as a Libertarian in 2016. I was not going to run in 2017. But there was a special election. I had planned on waiting and running in 2018, but there was a special election, so I thought, well, okay, I'll go ahead and do it. Well, as a consequence of those 3 runs, I became aware of some needs that we had for what I like to call lunchbox candidates, which is what I kind of felt I was. That is to say, I had a full-time day job. I'm not a professional politician. And running a campaign is sort of like launching a startup with no venture capital and running it into IPO or bankruptcy in less than a year. So I started up Ignite Foundation to offer basically a turnkey operation for in the first phase of running your campaign. So we'll be providing people with like the website, your funding platform, social media. All those things that you really need to get your campaign off and running, which is why I called it the Ignite Foundation. I also, every year, well, this would have been my 3rd year, I host an event at our Capitol called Stop Taxing the Hell Out of Us. Last year, we had a pretty good turnout. We had planned on actually having it this year on the 15th, but due to the stay-at-home orders right now, we've had to postpone that. I'm thinking we'll probably go ahead and have it in July. So that brings me to this COVID situation and just a little bit of the timeline, my own personal timeline on the COVID crisis. I first became aware of the situation in January. My husband and I were actually traveling in Asia, and I was watching some podcasts. One of them was one led by Dr. Chris Martenson, Peak Prosperity. And I will tell you, I think that's one of the most credible podcasts I've seen on the subject. Back in January, when I was watching and kind of doing the research, I was in a wait and see mode. I didn't know. I kind of thought 2 things. I thought, one, I didn't think it was going to hit the United States. Ebola didn't. Some of the other, SARS didn't really affect the United States so much. And I thought if it did hit our shores, well, we have such a sophisticated healthcare system. Well, we'll nip it in the bud. Well, all of that changed February 29th when it hit my community. I live in Kirkland, and it hit the Life Care Center in Kirkland. And I realized, oh my gosh, we have a real situation here. I contacted my good friend, Dr. Kyle Varner, who is a doctor at a hospital in Spokane, Washington, I believe. And I asked him, how serious is this? And he told me at the time, he said, Michelle, this is huge and the hospitals aren't ready. So I immediately did a full pivot. I have a pretty big network. So I started contacting my friends. And when I say immediate, I mean that night, telling them, don't go to church tomorrow. Don't go to these events. We've got a serious situation coming. And as libertarians, we believe in personal responsibility. I've talked a lot about the fact that personal responsibility is sort of the flip side of liberty. And so I felt as a libertarian and, my friends in the libertarian community, that this was an opportunity for us to get out front and lead the example in terms of voluntary responsibility and self-isolating. Now, at that particular time, I thought it just meant a matter of not going to big groups. But then as it evolved, I realized that, we needed to take steps in terms of the social distancing. So I also took my Ignite Foundation and we did a pivot. We set up a page called Quarantine Corona, and that's still in a group that shares information and, just tries to encourage libertarian leadership with respect to the situation. I feel like this is a huge opportunity for libertarians to sort of step forward and parlay off of the government's failures. And when I say government failures, I'm not so sure entirely that it's necessarily failure. It could be intentional, but I'm being purely speculative here. But there's a saying, never let a good crisis go to waste. And I happen to know that at the World Economic Forum in October of 2019, they ran a simulation on COVID-19. And so I kind of think they knew this was coming down the pike. But whether it's failure or intentional, there was a huge problem on the front end in terms of lack of testing, lack of good information, the lack of masks. At the beginning, they were telling us, oh, well, you don't need a mask. Well, that was because we had short supply, didn't even have enough for the healthcare workers. When my husband and I were in Asia in January, everywhere we went, they were wearing a mask. So obviously, they've been through these cycles a little bit, maybe not to the extent of COVID, but they've dealt with other, I don't know if I want to say pandemics, but they certainly dealt with other similar situations in terms of SARS and MERS and some of these other things. And they have gotten in the practice of wearing masks. There was also, particularly at the state level, I've seen a complete lack of relief and reassurance for small businesses and families. Now, I'm not a big proponent of, giving out checks. For example, $1,200 that we're supposed to all theoretically get, which, by the way, I'll believe it when I see it. But theoretically, we're all supposed to get $1,200, and I've seen the math on that. And with when you counter that with what it's actually going to cost us, I think the math shows it's going to be about $6,000 we're going to pay back for that $1,200. When I'm talking about relief, I'm talking about tax relief, and I'm talking about mortgage relief. Tax relief in my own state, I'd like to see the B&O tax. I would like to see a B&O tax holiday. I'd like to see a holiday on our property taxes. We had, in the last 2 sessions, we've had a significant increase in our property taxes, B&O taxes, sales taxes right across the board. And I'd like to see those increases rolled back, at least temporarily, if not permanently. On mortgage, we have not, there's been some talk about this forbearance, but from my perspective, it's kind of a bait and switch. And I saw this happen back in 2008 with the recession and the HAMP program, the Housing Affordable Modification Program, which was the flip side of TARP. I don't know if you recall, but the bailouts were kind of called TARP, the Troubled Asset Relief Fund. And they bailed out the banks, and then the flip side of that was supposed to be this HAMP program, which the banks then turned around and used as a bait and switch. 82% of people who should have qualified for relief under HAMP ended up losing their homes. So I see sort of that same thing happening here. In my own state, there's a moratorium on rents and, not rents, but evictions. But if you don't provide tangible relief for the landlords, then you really have a sort of unsustainable situation. If you really want to provide relief, I wouldn't say the forbearance that they're offering and calling relief right now is there's two problems with it. One, good luck getting a hold of a servicer. I actually tried myself last week just as an experiment. I was on hold for 31 minutes on one call, on hold again for 44 minutes, transferred over to loss mitigation, and then they hung up on me. So, relief does no good for you if you can't even get a hold of the right party to get the relief. Secondly, if you do get a hold of them, more often than not, what they're going to tell you is that, okay, fine, we're here to help you, and we will let you go 3 or 4 months behind, but then and miss those payments. But at the end of that 3 or 4 months, or whatever it ends up being, you're going to owe all that money all at once. Well, that's no sort of help at all, because if you've gone this period and your business is tanked because of these orders, or you've lost income because you lost your job, how are you going to come up with 4 months rent, mortgage all at once? And they're going to tell you, well, sorry, that's the way it goes, and they're going to initiate foreclosure. So I think that, if we're going to talk about how to really handle the situation, I think it would be through tax relief and mortgage relief. And what I would like to see libertarians doing in our, community online and elsewhere is maybe pivoting a little bit off the resistance of the orders. I mean, naturally, we're libertarians. We don't like it. It's an infringement on our liberties, obviously. But I'd like to see us sort of pivot our messaging more in terms of solutions and demanding the leaders. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of libertarians elected, so we have to work with the Democrats and the Republicans. But let's demand that they offer us real relief, and let's demand that they offer us tax relief. Let's demand that they offer mortgage relief. In my own state, I sent a letter to my state representative, as well as several others. I think a total of 6. I sent the same letter to all of them. I found out last week that my letter actually made it to the governor's desk. I was suggesting amendments to in Washington state, our Deed of Trust Act, which governs non-judicial foreclosure. And I had 3 specific things that I wanted changed in that. I'm not going to go into those details here. You can see them on my wall. I talk about it a lot. But in your own state, I would be encouraging libertarians to be writing their legislators, to be writing their local, city council, whatever. Identify the needs in your community and what needs to change, and offer up solutions versus this sort of philosophical conversation about liberty. Because the reality is, right now, if you talk to the average voter out there that probably doesn't know that much about libertarianism, if you talk about liberty and, oh my gosh, they're infringing on our liberty, that's going to go right over their heads. What they're concerned right now is, how am I going to feed my family? How am I going to put a roof over my head? And you have to reach hearts before you can change minds. And I think that's where a lot of libertarians get off track. We have fantastic ideas, but we fail to reach the hearts of the people in our community. And I think the way you do that is two ways. One, as I mentioned before, being an example of leadership, offering up solutions, showing people how to engage in the political process, like writing your legislators. And then two, reaching their hearts in terms of the needs in the community. And with that, I think I'm going to kind of close here. And hopefully Kevin's okay with this, but I brought another libertarian friend of mine who's on this call or on this podcast. His name is Ryan Cooper, and he's an amazing example of what I mean in terms of be the change, be the leader. He is organizing an effort in Washington State called Liberty Wings, and we're going to raise money and buy masks and distribute them throughout the communities here in Washington State. And I'll tell you, he's going to get a lot more engagement from people who might be liberty curious than any talk, podcast, speech, or whatever about libertarianism. People will flock to that. And then as using that as a conduit, he and the people helping him will establish relationships with new people in the community and then be able to share with them the principles that we all hold so dear to us. So with that, I'm going to close. Thank you so much. I hope I haven't gone on too long here. Be the change and be a leader in the community.
Michelle, thank you so much. That's why you're my hero. You're the Lady of Liberty, the Queen of Liberty. But Michelle, let me ask you one quick question. You mentioned that you thought our government had failed. Are you referring to federal, state, or local? Which governments do you think have failed in this pandemic situation?
All of the above.
All of them. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, because that is something that I've noticed in the kingdom. I talk to people all over the country and people in rural areas, bigger cities. And what we've seen is the local governments are not in line with the federal, which is not in line with the state. And it's like, it's a catastrophe. It is a complete mess. But I thank you so much for your great comments and your insight as usual. And like Michelle mentioned, we are going to move on to Mr. Ryan Cooper. One thing that Michelle mentioned that, I stand for is putting our liberty into action. And like I said, we start with this podcast, we raise conversations, we get opinions, but we also go out and put our liberty into action. And here is a typical example of that. Welcome to the Liberty Show, Ryan.
Thank you, Kevin. Yes, so my name is Ryan Cooper. I've known Michelle for several years now. I'm here in Tri-Cities, Washington, and that is in Southwest Washington. So we're closer to Oregon and Idaho on the opposite end of the state of Seattle. And I, like many folks, lost my job basically at the end of March. I was doing kiosk sales for my personal business, and a lot of businesses closed. The people paying me didn't have the money to pay me, and it was tough. And I said, there's got to be a way we can help people. So with the help of Anthony Welty and a few others, we started Liberty Wings. And the goal behind it is to raise money to bring in masks because a lot of people either can't find masks in the stores or they can't afford them. People are broke. There's just people that have very little money. So our goal is to get money, but also do more than that. We want to take these homemade masks that people are making and distribute those in the community. We also want to change behavior. We want to show that people are responsible. They don't need the government to force these orders on people. People naturally, if you're owning a business, you don't want your customers getting sick. You don't want your customers dying either. So providing masks to people is a good idea. So we want to show that we are responsible. And as libertarians, we can save lives and save jobs. We can do both at the same time. So our hope is that we get enough masks here as soon as possible so that on May 4th here in Washington State, we can lift this order. People can start going back to work and do so responsibly without spreading the disease. So we've got a couple initiatives as part of Liberty Wings. We're doing the Face Mask Challenge, and this is really exciting. So just like this bucket challenge a few years ago, we're going to start a viral campaign. We're putting the viral back in viral campaigns where people post pictures, a video of them wearing a face mask. It could be any homemade. It could be a purchase mask. It could be a silly mask. Just showing that, we need to wear masks when we're out in public, when we're around people. And then challenge 10 of your friends and then make a donation to libertywings.org. So the website is libertywings.org. It launches on April 15th. We have a splash page up right now. There's a GoFundMe link. It's GoFundMe, Liberty Wings Face Mask Challenge. You can donate there as well. We need all the donations we can get. So we think that's going to be a huge hit. With everybody stuck at home, these Face Mask Challenge videos should be the next big viral sensation. The homemade masks. So people who donate homemade masks are going to be masked avengers. So yes, we want to get people involved and be creative. So we're going to have the Masked Avenger initiative for those who donate homemade masks. And so we're going to have volunteers collecting those and distributing them in the community. And then for our business partners, we have what's called VIP, Voluntary Initiative Project, where we're going to highlight businesses that have donated money and that are providing masks to the community. So businesses who do the right thing and protect their customers should get recognition. So we're going to do that as well. So that's all part of libertywings.org. We encourage everyone on this call to promote it. We do have a Facebook page. We will be getting a Twitter page soon. We are making this a big effort. So we need to raise money to get 1 million masks. My personal business now is so instead of doing my previous business, I'm helping businesses procure face masks for their employees. So I know how to bring these masks into the country and how to get them at a fair price. So I just need to get the money though. So in my private business that's separate from Liberty Wings, that's called R. Cooper Sales, everyone that is buying masks from me, I'm going to be asking them for a donation. So I am going to try to use connections with the corporate world to try to bring in extra money, but also my connections with my suppliers and the people I get the masks from. If they know that I'm this Liberty Wings as a charitable organization, they should be able to give me a lower price. So the goal is to bring as many of these in as possible.
Well, we thank you, Ryan. I'm very interested in what you're doing, and hopefully we can have you back on the show, maybe just a night to talk about some of the stuff you're doing. Like everyone that knows me, I'm really excited about anything when you can put your liberty into action. As we know, a lot of times people of liberty like to talk and do a lot of social media work and things like that, but they don't actually like to do anything. But we will, just to let our guests know that we will be putting the links on our, the YouTube show notes. We're going to be putting some links to his GoFundMe page and other things to make sure that people can donate to you and support you. Thank you so much, Ryan. We look forward to hearing from you in the future.
I appreciate it.
Okay, now, not only Seattle has had some situations, the state of New York has also been very affected by this pandemic. And we've got another libertarian friend up in Rochester, New York, Mr. Kevin Wilson. You know he's awesome. His name is Kevin. So, Kev, you're on the Liberty Show. Let's hear from you.
Hey, Kevin. How's it going? Long time no talk, buddy.
Wonderful.
Yeah. No, Kevin, you and I had a great conversation just last Thursday on my show on Radio Free New York, and I hope your listeners check that out too. So we really got into it for a whole hour talking about what the federal government's doing, what Rochester's doing, what Georgia's doing. We're all over the place.
Yeah.
So yeah. I mean, here in New York State, it's interesting. You know, our governor Andrew Cuomo, he's instituted a 100% shutdown, just like many other states have started to do. And, you know, we're still allowed to go outside. We're still able to, take advantage of nature. But many of our restaurants, our bars, any non-essential businesses are closed. It's
Wait a minute. A bar is a non-essential business.
Actually, bars, funny enough,
are essential. They're essential.
They're essential enough where you can do pickup. You just can't go there. So you're able to go get food from a bar. You're able to get. They legalized getting takeout beer now in New York. Used to not be a thing. You can get takeout beer in New York State, but only for this crisis. They have given us permission for this short period of time. But I do want to comment just because, I got what Michelle said and what Ryan said, it's some amazing stuff. And I really appreciate that they're working towards tangible solutions. You don't keep it up pie in the sky. You start to work towards what do people actually care about? They care about those kitchen table issues. They care about like what's actually going to make my life better, what's going to make me safer. People are terrified right now. They're scared. And when people are scared, they want someone to protect them, which is why someone like Governor Cuomo, who's the New York State governor, gets out. He does this press conference every single day. He tells you what he's going to do. He tells you what more, what restrictions are being put on you today. And people are loving it, honestly. But so it's imperative for libertarians and anyone who's focused on solutions to make sure that we're able to weather this crisis effectively, both from, just from a pandemic point of view and also from like an economic point of view. It's imperative that we consider what people are thinking, reaching the hearts and minds of people, and also taking direct action too. Not waiting for government to give you permission to be able to act, to be able to assist your neighbors, and to be out in your community, building relationships with folks and looking for ways to support your neighbors and provide direct assistance. Again, we don't need to wait for the state to do that. So I want to mention that because hearing that stuff, it's incredible. And I'm definitely going to go check out both those organizations now, Liberty Wings and the stuff that Michelle was talking about. So that's great. And we're trying to do stuff like that in Rochester too. But, for sure, the big thing for me is I always think about is, again, how do we make sure that in this crisis, we're able to start to remove some of the barriers that are preventing people from being able to access solutions, right? How do we remove those barriers from the Centers for Disease Control, which tried to centralize authority and made it impossible for testing to be able to expand in private markets? How do we remove the barriers in the FDA and other organizations from being able to get personal protective equipment for frontline workers and for average citizens who want to just be able to go out and protect themselves to buy medical grade masks or other N95 or any type of masks? How do we get those organizations out of the way so private companies can rise to the occasion and do that? We've seen it here in Rochester. We've seen clothing companies who are starting to make clothing like cloth masks and medical grade masks. We've seen distilleries who are switching over to making hand sanitizer right here in my city. And it's incredible when, again, the FDA doesn't stand in the way of doing that. And so that's to me what we need to focus on, is that when individuals and companies are allowed to find their own solutions, we make incredible progress and we're able to address these issues far quicker than centralized authority. And we have a governor and we have a congressman in my area who keep talking about like, oh, well, we need to nationalize medical production. We need to push everything into centralized control. And I'm like, no, just the opposite. We need to unleash the creativity and the power and the local knowledge of private companies and individuals who are looking to serve their community better. And the best thing the government can do most of the times is to just let them do it.
I agree. The best thing the government could get out the darn way. So, Kev, let me ask you a quick question. I like you. I was like, man, this is a whole nother Kevin. This is just awesome, guys. I love my show because you
so
guys
humble,
just
Kevin.
come up with such. No, I just love. I mean, not that it's my show, but it's like that. I'm hearing from you guys that people, how you really feel. And you brought up a really good point about the free markets. I am a free market capitalist. I am not ashamed to say it, and we've made capitalism such a bad name. Capitalism does not necessarily equal greed. But when you have the free markets, you have the money, the research, the productivity, things that the government, just doesn't have. And if government was any good at it, I would probably not mind them doing it, but they fail at everything. So, just like you mentioned, the test, when the CDC came up with tests, they didn't even work. And,
busted.
Yeah. So go ahead. So Kevin, can you give me what's a tangible solution or possible thing that you have thought of or that might be helpful to some people through this pandemic?
I do want to address one part, the thing that I hear a lot is like, yeah, capitalism equals greed, right? We can't let the greedy capitalists take advantage of this situation. But the fact of the matter is that the people who are looking for opportunities to make money, either through ventilators or masks or whatever, they're adapting their businesses to be able to serve the needs of people. I don't care if they make money. The point is we need to make sure that we actually have these goods in the first place. When you have centralized control and there ends up being a lack of these products, isn't that a worse situation? Like, who cares if someone's making a profit off of it? It is better to have that stuff than to not have that stuff. And so again, that's the big tangible solution is that we need to, again, get the CDC out of the way in terms of testing. Allowing in-home test kits, I think, is going to be the number one issue. It's something I've talked about a lot is if we're able to have in-home test kits, we're able to track and trace, the sources of the virus, so more people are able to get out to work, to keep the economy going. We're going to have the wealth, the resources, and the creativity to be able to tackle this problem far faster than top-down, ham-fisted government control.
I agree with you, brother. Thank you, Kevin. That is awesome. Great. Kevin, I just really thank you for, and our hearts do, as Tim said earlier, go out to people. So many people have lost their lives in New York, but we're losing a lot of our freedoms in New York. We're losing a lot of not just liberties, but just the free markets and so much that we have fought so hard for in America and stood for. I do want to comment, people always could criticize, like you said, making money or capitalism, but those same corporations, the money they make, the profits, that's what pays these salaries when everyone wants a raise. That's what pays for the vacation, the bonuses, the Christmas parties, the donations to these museums and nonprofits. They come from these corporations. So if they're not making money, how do they have the money to donate, to sponsor things, to pay for things? And that's something people don't think about. So thank you so much, Kevin, so much. Who do we have next on the Liberty Show? Okay, we have Mr. Tevin Goss out of Atlanta, Georgia. Tevin, you're on the Liberty Show.
Hey, Kevin.
Hey, Tevin.
So the points that everybody made were really, really insightful, interesting, especially with how, like I said, our government is really handling the situation of the COVID pandemic. One of the things that I guess I wanted to point out more so was how our state, or how the state of Georgia handled this, and some of the southern states, how they initially handled the situation. I was somewhat, I don't want to say shocked, but maybe disappointed in the way, per se, our one of the statements that our governor made earlier, I don't know if this was like maybe in the month, where he said that he did not know that you could potentially spread this by being in contact with another person. That was a little, I guess, shocking. And I know that through the news, that spread through the news media when he made that statement, but also with the situation of certain public spaces that were permitted to be open and not necessarily have certain regulations put in place to monitor certain aspects of it, like the beaches in Florida that were still permitted to be open, and you had a whole flock of people that were on the beaches, but that there wasn't necessarily, I mean, if you're going to keep spaces like that open, then make sure that people are in place. I don't know if it was, whether it could be police officers, whoever, in place to really monitor certain situations like that. Because as we've seen, this with the government setting certain mandates, the states interpret that in different ways, and they allow the citizens, of course, to do what they need to do, of course, with the social distancing. But in certain situations, everybody doesn't necessarily follow through with that. And so that was really one of the things that I was really shocked at. Of course, I was reading in the news about how in certain spaces like nursing homes, with people who are more vulnerable, like the elderly, those places are getting hard. Even in prisons, how this is actually hitting individuals like that, how it's initially and essentially able to spread easily in spaces like that. And of course, they were also talking about, granted that tomorrow is Easter Sunday, how certain places of worship have to be careful. And maybe I feel like it could have been a stronger response on certain things like that. But I don't know. I think we will definitely have to, as we continue to go through this, watch everything very carefully, because this is a very unique situation. With the way our government has handled this, I'm not really shocked or surprised at anything that I've seen pertaining to this administration or certain situations with how our government has responded to this. We've seen in the past how in certain natural disasters, domestically or man-made, what the government has done. I mean, using examples such as Hurricane Katrina, when a lot of the citizens of New Orleans was left for a whole amount of days before rescue was made and provisions were made to those individuals. Now, I don't know why why there was a delayed response with that, but we saw the devastation that struck with individuals that were in that particular state. And there was a lot of response pertaining to that, being the fact that those individuals were poor and also people of color. But that's really all I have at this point, is to really just be vigilant and mindful of the people around you in your community and, like I said, in the state at large.
Well, Tevin, thank you for your insights as normal. I just want to touch quickly on two things you brought up. One, when you were talking about the governor's comments and just the communication. The biggest failure, one of the biggest failures in this whole pandemic has just been the government's communication from the federal to the state to the local. We're getting mixed signals. We're getting mixed messages. We're getting false messages. And I encourage people, I listen to the specialists, the experts, the scientists, the medical doctors. Don't listen to politicians, because they've been lying from day one, and lying is nothing new to them. And then they all begin to believe their own lies for some strange reason. But I also, when you were talking about like the nursing homes and things like that, so many of our regulations actually have tripped us up, even like with the HIP and different things. Well, it's great to have privacy but sometimes there are people that have been affected. They have so many laws and regulations, they can't even tell family members, they can't even tell other people working with these people that their life is in danger because of so many regulations on top of regulations on top of regulations. And that in itself has also caused many problems in our in this situation. But thank you so much. Next, let's go to Mr. Damon Kennedy in Stockbridge, Georgia. Damon, you're on the Liberty Show.
Hey, everybody. How you doing? So many great ideas and thoughts throughout the process on this call today. And Ryan in Washington, shout out to you for your organization. I'm definitely going to look that up and see if I can donate to help you out, because as Kevin said earlier, too, a lot of times libertarians wax poetic about a lot of different libertarian ideas and thoughts, but it's strictly, keyboard warrior stuff online. But when you actually put it in action, that definitely supported, so we can actually show that there is an alternative to just what I do want to say is two things. On the federal government side, it's absolutely egregious how, with the stroke of a pen, $2 trillion was just conjured out of thin air. I know this is a pandemic and it's a unique situation, but I caution us all to as Michelle mentioned earlier too, Rahm Emanuel said, never let a good crisis go to waste. So we saw after 9/11 the civil liberties that were taken from us on the name of protection and safety, but we've never gotten those back, because whenever the government takes a liberty away, they never give it back. It's always temporarily. We're told out of fear to say, just accept it. Hey, we need to get through this. But if it was a situation where that liberty was returned to us, okay, I get it, but it's never returned, and that's the problem. So
that sounds familiar, Damon. That sounds familiar. Where'd you get that from?
Yeah, man. So the $2 trillion they conjure out of thin air. I mean, it sounds good in theory to say, hey, we're trying to work through this troubling time, but that only works for people who aren't really aware of the situation that's led up to this point. A lot of these corporations who've been given money from the Fed, they've been the same companies who've been feeding from the government trough for years and doing stock buybacks. And so all of a sudden, they've allegedly been stockpiling money all these years, but now they're able to double dip. They've been collecting money all these years from the government. Now all of a sudden, this pandemic comes along, and they're able to dip their hands into the pot of money yet again. Meanwhile, the people are kind of told just to kind of suck it up. A $1,200 check, that's really nothing in the big scheme of things, because essentially, if you live in one of the higher tax or higher expense states like California, New York, or whatever, $1,200 bucks, that may last you a couple of days. But regardless of all that, the point is, how much money does the government take from you from taxation in the first place? Because $1,200 bucks, that's money you already technically had in your possession, but the government extracts it from you and gives it back to you, acting like they're doing something. That's nonsense.
And
then
David,
also too,
I just got to piggyback on that, because that is such a, I'm jumping up and down. People don't realize, the government's not sending you anything. They're returning what they stole from you, what they put, a gun to your head and just took because you didn't give them permission to take it out your check. At least I didn't, at least. And people got to understand that.
They really do. I mean, the government really has no money. The emperor has no clothes. The government technically has no money of its own. They only have the money they're able to forcibly extract from the citizenry, and then they try to give it back. Say, take it from your left pocket, put it in your right, act like they did something for you. No, it's your money all along. So, that's one thing that I hate. And then secondly, I was going to talk about, anti-price gouging laws and how they're not really necessary if companies are allowed to do for themselves and figure out how to best allocate their goods. So I say that to say, anecdotally, I think it's either Sweden or Norway, where they had a product where if you buy one, it's $4, which is the normal price. If you buy two, which technically, in the pandemic, everybody's going to want to buy all they can. Well, if you buy two, the second one's like $95. So it sounds absurd, but it still allows for the person to get the one that they need and then allow for everybody else to get what they need as well. Because if you go to the store right now, you try to find toilet paper is like gold now. You can't find it anywhere. You know what I'm saying? but the problem
I've been looking for weeks.
Yeah, but the problem with that is if you buy one or you buy 50, it's the same price for all of them. So there's nothing to stop the first person that's scared to buy a bunch of toilet paper, and then people are like sheep, and they say, oh, my God, maybe they know something I don't know. Let me buy a bunch of toilet paper. So now no places have toilet paper. You can go to Dollar General, Family Dollar, Walmart, Target. Doesn't matter. None of them have it because of that herd mentality of people saying, well, maybe they know something I don't know. Let me buy up all the toilet paper instead of doing it. This is a respiratory illness. It does not cause explosive diarrhea. You don't need that much damn toilet paper. You know what I'm saying? But but the problem is, if they worked with the pricing and allowed the stores to not get caught up in anti-price gouging laws. If you buy one, cool. You need one. You've got 12 rolls. You'll be fine. But the next one you buy, okay, it's going to be jacked up. Now, don't try and charge me with anti-price gouging laws, because I'm allowing you to get the one that you actually need. You don't need 50 more. You don't. Stop it. So that's pretty much it. I got it off my chest.
Well, one thing I want to comment on, my favorite topic, and that is crony capitalism. Some of these corporations that we're quote unquote bailing out, this is like the 110th, 200th time we've bailed them out. And, we're loaning them money. They don't have to pay it back. They're some of the same corporations that have donated to these politicians' campaigns. And, we don't want to talk about all of that. I've noticed something that really disturbed me. Even the president, sometimes when he's talking, he actually mentions certain corporations on the news about they're coming up with new testing or possibly a cure or a vaccine. And then their stock shoots up. I don't think all of that's accidental. That, is really something that's very dangerous, and it's not helping the average citizen. Some of these same corporations are getting bailed out, and it's just corporate welfare. People have a fit if you help a homeless person or a woman with children that's not working, but yet we give millions and billions and now even trillions to these corporations who have just messed over the money. They, like you said, they've been spending money. They haven't saved. They're not in debt. They're all in debt. And then they want us to bail them out. So thank you so much, Damon. I just had to get that off my chest, as you said. So do we have anyone else, Mr. Jared? Or did you want to say anything?
Yeah, we have a phone number that connected ending in 1724. I will unmute them, see if they have anything to add.
Welcome, Frank.
Been listening to the conversation and been enjoying it. So I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, friend of Kevin's, and I just wanted to kind of chime in and add that, I guess most concerning to me has been how the government has sort of or in some states blatantly restricted freedom of religion, that you can't go to an open congregation. And I guess the debate of whether or not government has the right to quarantine and stop, freedom of religion is the question. But there again, their guidelines they've given have included 6 feet. But the quick response from most of the churches in this area has been to have services in your car where you just pull up in the parking lot and the preacher's got an FM broadcaster that, shoots out a signal, 100 feet, and, you're not in human contact with anyone. You're in your car. You're more than 6 feet away from anyone. Literally all of the mandated requirements have been met, yet just last Sunday, there's several different videos up on Twitter where you can see police swarming into these parking lots, blocking everyone and handing out $500 tickets to old ladies and nurses. It didn't matter, anybody that showed up that was in the parking lot just sitting in their car gets to tap on the window and ask for their license, whether or not they're driving or not, engine turned off, doesn't matter. They get a ticket, $500 one, pretty hefty. When they're, these are larger cities where, there's real crime happening, but here they are at a, Temple Baptist Church or whatever, trying their best to keep folks from, doing their worship. And I think that's a travesty. I think that government has no place to do that, especially when you're meeting their requirements, at the same time. And there's been some legal battles in the news, if you've paid attention, where it's like city courts and stuff, where they say the mayor has no right. In Louisville, I think was one of them. St. Louis was another, where they said they don't have the right to do that, but that doesn't stop the court date. Still got to show up or pay your fine. And this has happened across the nation. And I guess to an extent, we've had this sort of secret reporting, hotline kind of deal, where you can call up and report someone. But like I've noticed here locally, here in Atlanta, for instance, on Nextdoor, Facebook, the county police have regular postings on updates, and one of their regular posts that they always put up is their reporting site. Like if you see any business that is not meeting the requirements of the non-essential, if they're non-essential and they're open, and if they're allowing people within 6 feet, that you can call this number or online report. Basically a secret reporting police setup, and that would include, I assume, any churches. Where at this point you have people that for whatever reason don't like that people have the freedom of religion, and so they call this call the state basically a secret state police agency that they can report it to and they show up and hand out tickets to arrest folks. It's just a lot of dangerous territory that we're heading into, and that's just one, with the freedom of religion, and not to mention, 40 states now that you can't buy a gun. Second Amendment is essentially suspended as far as sales, on top of everything else. So it's if we're not headed towards martial law, I don't know what you would call this, but it's certainly a loss of liberties that I'm seeing, and it's most concerning. I don't know if anyone has noticed any of these or had their own experiences, but these are just things that I've noticed myself locally, and it's most concerning.
Well, thank you, Mr. Frank from Atlanta. That's a lot of great stuff I've noticed, and other people have been calling me and emailing me and texting me. I just want to piggyback, that's one thing that I've been so concerned about is the bigger picture. The fact, I agree with some of the social distancing. You don't want to spread the disease. But when you go into people's private lives, when you go into their churches, their religion, their spirituality, and you actually handcuff them, you arrest them. Now some of these people have felonies. They have criminal charges that when they go to get a job or to get rent an apartment, when you start fining people. Once again, the government after more money, just taking our taxes is not enough. They want to fine people, and you got to have a note in certain cities just to go down the street. I mean, if that is not a militarization of our communities, what is it? So that is what I'm looking at and seeing the bigger picture of a lot of these things that, and like Damon said earlier, once the government infringes and takes, they don't want to give it back. And hopefully we will wake up and begin to put our liberty into action. Well, once again, I thank you guys for listening to the Liberty Show. Are there any final comments, Jared or Mr. Lewis? You might not want to speak, but we thank you for being on the call. Anyone else before we go?
Sure, I'll pitch in a little bit to close out here. I really appreciated everything people brought to the table tonight. I think there was a lot of level-headed discussion and really salient points to consider. So I'm glad we were able to really look at this from so many different angles and also do some problem solving with how we can make this the best, make the best of this situation and what to perhaps be wariest of. One of the things I would say I would like to see is just being able to shift to better consciousness of some of the legitimate roles of government through this, and roles that can help protect our liberties. Like just the fact that the response from the different levels of government has been so discombobulated, and there's so much different information coming out and so much disunity. Just being able to have something that some kind of body in the government that is able to really be on top of disease and pandemics, and not in a regulatory function like the CDC really tends to do, but just in a preparedness function similar to some of our military defense that is constantly prepared and ready to adapt and take strong leadership if a situation that requires a military response were to arise. And so considering that this disease, this pandemic, is a very legitimate threat to American livelihoods, similar to how militarized conflict can be, the fact that we have next to nothing allocated for really solid leadership and clear communication and systems that can really effectively mobilize in response to something like this is really disheartening. And so one of the things I'd really like to be able to see is just some effective mobilization in that direction. And it doesn't need to be this really like big government sort of thing. One of the best functions something like this could serve as just really interconnecting more hospitals and doctors and researchers so that they can share information and share resources and really be able to work as collaboratively as possible through these tough crises. And I mean, a lot of people have brought up the legitimately good American ingenuity we've seen already as a response to this, and just having a more intentional system in place to help connect these disparate aspects would really help maximize the effectiveness of our own more liberty-focused responses here. So keeping my fingers crossed that if we're going to see some developments on the governmental level, it'll be something more in that direction that will allow us to respond better to these types of situations in the future. As what I've been hearing from the epidemiological experts that I've been tuning into is this isn't going to be the last one. That there's a lot of latent threat out there in terms of diseases like this that can pop up. So yeah, we need.
Well, Jared,
go ahead.
Let me ask you, what do you think about the government turning some of these things over to private companies or private sources, some of the college, research facilities or institutes, or like a public-private partnership?
Yeah.
For some reason, they want to keep everything in the government's hands, and they're failing. You've got companies with the resources, with the money to pay quality people scientists, MIT graduates, Stanford graduates, Harvard graduates. You let the companies use them, but the government wants to keep everything, seem like in their little box, and it's hurting everyone. Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. Seeing more of that private and public partnership would be definitely incredible, so that we can get out of some of this authoritarian and coercive types of relations that the government is in with this system right now. What I really want to see, though, is just a clear leadership. I mean, we're the United States here, but we've really been just flapping around in figuring out how to respond to this until really pretty recently, and even now it's still very hazy. So just knowing that there's an institution we have available that we can trust and turn to, and really know that they have the leadership that we need.
Thank you, Jared. Thank everyone for all of their comments. And like everyone has been saying, what are tangible solutions? One thing, support yourself by supporting others. Reach out to some of these organizations, Liberty Wings and Michelle's Institute, and support some of these libertarian candidates, Alan Buckley in Georgia and Kevin Wilson up in Rochester, and others that are trying to run for office to make a difference. And also, you could also support us, support the Liberty Show. Go to www.patreon.com/The Liberty Show. Only $5 a month. We would greatly appreciate it. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Make sure you hit that like button right now. If you haven't subscribed, stop whatever you're doing and subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything. But also share this with others and help us to put liberty in action. Thanks, and liberty to all.